Continuing on the open channel notes, I want to talk about supercritical flow theory. So open channel flow, whether in a stream or a flume or any kind of open channel, can be classified as critical, subcritical, or supercritical flow. And this is based on, is the velocity faster or slower than the wave speed? And the ratio between the velocity in the channel and the wave speed is quantified as the Froude number. So a Froude number of 1 means the velocity equals the wave velocity, which means you're at critical flow. So you can have critical flow, critical velocity, critical depth, critical slope. And we usually I often think of the depth, but then, sub is below, super is above. So supercritical flow would be deeper than is relative to the velocity. So supercritical is shallower and faster than subcritical flow. So the surface wave speed, c, can be calculated as the square root of g times the hydraulic depth, which is the area over the top width for a for a rectangular cross section. It's just the depth. And that's what I have in the flume that I'll show you in a second, and what we did in the first problem, and then the remaining problems on the exercise, which again we'll get to. So the Froude number is how we classify supercritical or subcritical flow, and again that relates to the wave velocity. So the reason it matters is that subcritical flow, the flow is controlled by downstream conditions. So the pressure wave or the wave can go upstream. So if you have a weir or a dam, or you have some type of obstruction in the stream and you're at subcritical flow, then that can affect what happens upstream of that. If you're in supercritical flow, then it's going really fast, then nothing you do downstream will affect the flow upstream. So it'll affect the flow downstream from there. So that's why it matters. And again, if subcritical flow is slow and deep, which comes on flat grades, and that's a Froude number less than 1, so you get y is the depth is greater than the critical depth, velocity is less than the critical velocity, and the slope is less than the critical velocity. By the way, we can calculate the critical depth by going back and solving that equation for the Froude number of 1. So supercritical flow is fast and energetic flow, which comes from steep grades and shallow water. And again, a stream or a flume or something can transition back and forth between them. And so the flow is controlled on the upstream side again. There's another way to describe the flow and the flow regimes is by something called the specific energy. The specific energy is y, the depth, plus the v squared over, that's the velocity head. So it's the head relative to the bottom of the channel. So it's the depth. So that would be the elevation plus the pressure head, that point there, plus the velocity head. Let me show you a plot here. So for the same flow, if it's going down a flat surface, flat-ish surface, it's going to be deep and slow. And that's subcritical. So deep and slow is subcritical. And if we plot, this blue here is the specific energy, y, the depth plus velocity squared over 2g. The velocity is very small. The total specific energy is pretty much just the depth of it. If it's really fast, then the difference between the depth and the specific energy is the velocity there. So the point where you get the minimum specific energy, that's the critical point. That's where Froude number equals 1. And by the way, so we can transition between these, if we make so like on punchline, we talk about a hydraulic jump. That hydraulic jump is what happens a lot of times at the bottom of like a dam spillway. The water's coming down here and then it goes flat. Well, here it's fast, it's supercritical, and here it's subcritical. So it transitions between there, and so it shoots down here, it's still going fast here, but then it will pop up, it'll jump to a higher. Actually, I should make this and draw that very well. So I'll show you a video in a second here. So that's a hydraulic jump. It jumps from, again, this is a plot for the same flow. If we change the slope, it'll jump from supercritical flow up to subcritical flow. And the reason it goes back a little bit here is it actually loses some energy, loses some head. Matter of fact, they use that at the bottom of a dam or dam spillway or something. You have to dissipate that energy. It has a lot of energy. So they can purposely make it so there's a big hydraulic jump, and that'll dissipate the energy to a certain degree. So going on the description here, hydraulic jump transition between supercritical flow and subcritical flow. It dissipates energy. So supercritical flow, high energy flow, can cause a lot of erosion. Hydraulic jump can be intentionally used to dissipate energy, but it will happen anyway when you go from a supercritical flow to a subcritical flow. And the interesting thing, and I say this in the video that I've already recorded that is really interesting, is that's actually predictable where that can happen. So it's quite interesting. So I'll show you that video here. So that's a hydraulic jump there. That happens when you force the water through a change of slope, or in this case by putting that gate down. It wants to be subcritical, and we force it supercritical, and it'll eventually jump from supercritical to subcritical. And what's cool about hydraulic jump is it's actually predictable where that happens and the size of it. And so I'm going to adjust a couple factors and look at what happens to the hydraulic jump. So now I'm increasing flow. The hydraulic jump starts heading downstream. Decreasing flow. It starts heading back upstream. Similarly, slope, increased slope, and it heads downstream. Decreased slope, and it starts coming back upstream. Hydraulic jumps are pretty cool. Let me now take you to the exercise we're going to work on. As I said in the last video, the first one is just a plug and chug with a rectangular channel, easiest geometry there to calculate the flow. And now we're going to take that same channel. This is not the same flow as part A. And we're just going to manipulate these equations around. So at a flow rate of 400 cubic feet per second, calculate the critical depth in a 7-foot wide rectangular channel. So the flow number is velocity over g times yh, the square root of that. For a rectangular section, the yh, the hydraulic depth, is just the depth. And v is q over the cross-sectional area, which is the width times the depth. At critical flow, the wave velocity equals the velocity. Velocity equals the wave velocity. The flow number is 1. Arrange that, you get equation for y critical. So punch in those numbers and get the critical depth. And then with that critical depth, you have a flow. Again, v equals q over a. Punch that in and solve for the velocity. Now, if the channel has a depth and a of 6 feet and a flow of 450 cubic feet per second. That's the number we've been working with. What is the velocity? So velocity at critical depth, velocity at 6 foot depth. So is 6 feet above or below critical? Is the velocity above or below critical? So is the flow supercritical or subcritical? Remember, it's supercritical flow. That's faster. So the velocity is faster. The depth is lower. And so this is just getting us to walk through and think about that. All right. So based on that, the depth or the velocity, determine if it's supercritical. And then that, if it's true, what does that tell us about the slope of the 6 foot depth relative to the critical value? And then go ahead and calculate the Froude number for a 7 foot wide channel with a flow of 450 cubic feet per second, depth of 6 feet. So you have the area, 6 times 7 feet. You have the flow. You can calculate the velocity. You can calculate the wave velocity using the equation up here, or just calculate this g times yh, or again, for rectangular, yh is y, or the depth, and then calculate specific energy for that. So that's just a quick exercise in fiddling with the Manning's equation first, and then with the critical depth equation. And this comes into play for the design of culverts and other facilities that handle the flow. You need to know if it's supercritical or subcritical. That's a bit beyond the scope of this course, but I at least wanted to throw it out there and put it in your brain and let you know what that language means.